Yeah, but we'll definitely talk about that. Yeah. So without further ado, let's bring him on. Uh, the devious one, Don E. Allen. Welcome to In the Room. A lot of people don't know this, Don, but this is like years in the making. I think it was like in 2009 or 2010. You scribbled down your number on a piece of paper, and I shoved it in my pocket, and I think it went in the trash with a tissue. I never found it, and it's my fault for not trying to find other channels to find you. But I'm so glad to have you on the air right now. How you doing?
Good, Gravy. And I've heard you say how you're doing 4 or 5 times already. So,
Yeah, yeah, I'm
uh,
doing good, right? Still
but I'm
kicking.
going to ask anyway. How you doing?
I'm doing good.
Good.
Good. Good.
Good.
Good to talk to you. Good to talk to you.
Good to talk to
Yeah,
all of you all.
it's great to see your face. And
Oh,
it's
jeez.
funny. You hopped on earlier, before we started the show, and you didn't have your bandana on, and I didn't recognize you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
it keeps, like I said, I like to put that on because the shine off of my forehead is so intense that I didn't want to ruin the podcast. So,
I'm sure it's fine. It's interesting to me because I mean you've been away from the wrestling scene for a few years now, at least in terms of being an active wrestler. But with this TWA one and done thing, it feels like all these guys that I haven't heard their names in forever are suddenly like back in the spotlight. Like, what's that been for you? What's that been like for you?
uh, so far, it's really been more about reconnecting with the boys and and
Hmm.
and and gals, more so than anything having to do with fan reaction or you know the outside world. It's really been the cool thing has been reconnecting with people, a few of whom I stayed in touch with over the years, but a lot of whom I have not. So getting to see them and being in a text thread with all of these guys, because when we were doing what we did, there was no such thing. You were either calling somebody on the phone or
Right.
where you saw them when you saw them, and that was it. So it's just cool. It's cool to see a text from Johnny Hotbody pop up on your phone. It gives me a kick. So yeah, that's very cool.
Yeah, and imagine it's a lot like kind of like a high school reunion in a way. Like you go so long without like seeing these guys on the daily, and then all of a sudden it's like
Yeah,
everybody's together again and communicating. It's been an amazing thing what they've kind of pulled together.
yeah. It's and it's emotions that come with it that are hard to maybe not hard to explain, but if you're not all up in it, it may seem odd that it gets emotional, but it does. When you see these guys that you worked with and did everything with. It's an emotional thing because everybody gave a lot of themselves to do it, and a lot of them on a much higher level than I did really at the time. But we were all there together, and we were all pushing in the same direction for a good couple of years. It was a lot, and yeah.
Yeah, it seems like it's emotional. Don E, let me ask you, like, what was so special about the TWA? Like everybody always talks about those couple years there.
Uh, at the time, because I was new to the business, so it's more in hindsight. I mean, I knew
Okay.
that it was special to me simply because it was a dream that I had that I never thought I would fulfill, to actually to work in the business in any capacity. And believe me, I did not expect that I was going to end up in the ring. But that's where life led me. But I just from the time I was 4 years old, I just wanted to be involved somehow, and that it that was those couple of years involved there, and the year before that starting to train. um, I didn't really have any perspective on it at that point other
Mm-hmm.
than
Mm-hmm.
knowing that I was hurt all the time. but but that was and how cool it was to actually be able to live that dream out. In hindsight, now you look at uh, the influence that it had on the business, and where some of those people ended up going in their careers that started
Sure.
at that time, and people who were on their way up that we got to work with. And I'm talking about your Cactus Jacks and uh, people like that, Owen Hart, people that were not yet household names that came through that we were just they were just your peers, and that's to see the success that they had is I've just always felt that was one of the coolest things about it. And oh no,
Did
yeah, I worked with that guy,
Sure. No, it's an amazing thing. Like if you think about it, especially for people that kind of came up as fans in the wrestling business, which a lot of you guys did. Did you realize at the time, like what a special time that was kind of going to become in wrestling history?
I don't I don't think so. I really don't. I just there was obviously momentum, and we could see the crowds at the big shows. We were still doing little shows in front of a couple hundred people too. Um, but again, I didn't have the perspective at that point. I might have had a little more than some of the other guys that I started with, because I was already older than a lot of those guys. I mean, some of them were in their late teens, early 20s. Your Jimmy Genettis and
Okay.
your Glenn Osbornes, and I was older than them when I started, so I had maybe a little bit more of an adult view, but it was still all new to me. So um, yeah, I have to think about that, Brady. Let me get back. Let me get back to you on another podcast. No, I don't.
Of
I don't
course.
think
Yeah.
so. I just, again, it's in my head. Those 2 years of PWA they were all moments. I mean, I can remember vivid moments from being in a locker room with Jerry Lawler and just having a conversation. I mean, that's something that, to a fan, which is what I was. Um, you know, the thought of that happening just was beyond comprehension years
Okay.
before it happened. And then when it happened, you're in it and you do it, and you try not to be a jerk. It's like, I got a Jerry Lawler here. I mean, it's just as an example. Or, you're brushing your teeth and there's Ivan Koloff next to you. Well, I watched Ivan Koloff when I was
Right.
8 years old,
Yeah.
and beyond. And just that, again, to be I don't know if I want to say peer, but certainly to be a coworker, you know,
Sure.
um, and
Colleague.
just, yeah, it just, even now, as an old dude, it gives me a thrill to think of my younger self finding himself in that position. So that was cool. Obviously, we're all just people, and great athletes are in the end just people
Yeah.
too. But yeah, that was a special thing.
And we've all got a great Ivan Koloff story, I'm sure. Stro Maestro, for example, was trained by the man. I
Oh,
met him.
okay.
I met him while he was eating ribs with Abdullah the Butcher. So you
Yeah.
never quite know.
Well, I have
Amazing
more.
fellow.
Ivan was a very nice man, and
Yes, he was.
my and I worked in the ring with him as well, once in a tag, but
Okay.
with the least known of the Koloffs, Vladimir, and with all due respect to him, there's a reason he was the least known, I think, of the Koloff troop. But
Okay.
we'll leave it at that. He was okay, but I got Abdullah stories too, because I got thrown at.
Oh boy. He was a TWA guy.
Yeah, but how this happened, I mean, I still don't know how this happens. I'm in the business for less than a year, and I'm being
Yeah.
thrown into a match
I shouldn't laugh. I'm
managing
sorry.
Abdullah versus Bam
Okay.
Bam Bigelow. Why
Okay.
am I here? What right do I to be in this spot? I mean, obviously somebody
Yeah.
thinks I can do it, but it was just crazy. I managed Abby twice against Bam Bam at shows, and it was just craziness, craziness. And I can remember selling um, Bam Bam press slammed me and then headbutted me, and I bumped out, and that was it. I was to do nothing else at that point. And I'm selling on the outside for the whole rest of
Right.
the match. And there's people in the crowd, smart people who were,
Yeah.
they're screaming at me, "Come on, you can get up. It was just a headbutt." And I wanted to say, you tell Bammer
Yeah,
that it's just a
yeah,
headbutt, and you're gonna no sell that, please.
yeah, yeah.
But that
Okay,
that really happened. I remember it like it was yesterday. This guy
that's
screaming at me,
amazing.
"Come on!" It was just a headbutt.
That's really funny. One of
Um,
my favorite Abby stories. It involved. So apparently he was out in the ring and he's just slicing anybody that came out. He's slicing them.
yeah,
Referees, wrestlers, whatever. And
yeah.
this referee friend of mine goes and hides in the shower. They're all looking for him because they want to send him out there. And he goes and hides. I thought that how apropos.
Oh yeah, we saw them do that to our guys. I think Jim
Yeah.
Molyneux, it was either Sheik or Abby. One of them put a big X on his forehead, and and I'm pretty sure it was Jim. And I remember him being so worried about his wife seeing this, and trying to hide it
Yeah.
from her. So yeah, crazy. But you know, I just in a million years couldn't imagine it. I remember one night in the locker room, Glenn Osborne and I had to help Abby he had like I don't know what you'd call it. It was not a weight belt. It was sort of like a giant, you
Girdle.
know, industrial truss of some kind.
It
And
was a
Okay.
girdle.
it was a girl. Okay. All right. And we're
There you
on,
go.
each of us are on one side of him, pulling this thing like we're playing tug of war, except we're
Right.
tightening it on him for him.
Yeah.
And uh, and there's a million of those snapshots in my head of things that happened at those shows. Meeting Chris Candido and Tammy and Sabu. We were all just starting out. Obviously, these are major talents in the world, and went on to the stuff that they went on to. But when I would see them years after that, and to this day, when I see Sabu, it's like a warm thing because he remembers too. We were just two guys in the locker room.
Yeah.
He, obviously he is who he is, and his uncle is who he is, and all of that. So, um, but in the end, we were just going out there to do our job that night. So, very cool. And I respect all of those guys. The ones that were most of them were very, very good to me. I mean, all the way down the line, the ECW guys too, with rare exceptions. And they knew they could trust me to do what I needed to do and be in the right place at the right time. And I tried my best to protect the business whenever I could. And I sold and sold, and I sold outside, and I sold on the way home. And if I went to 7-Eleven, 50 miles away from the arena, I sold, because that was instilled in me. And I just somehow I just knew this is what I'm supposed to do. And so I took it very seriously in that regard.
Well, I think the fact that you took it so seriously, I think that kind of shows a big part of the reason why the TWA and later the ECW as well, why they really felt special and different, from a lot of what was out there in the early 90s. This listener in particular wants to know, now you mentioned a lot of names, obviously, who passed through the TWA as well as ECW.
Mhm.
Um, how did those two companies compare? Were they really as similar as a lot of people kind of perceive them?
Uh, it's they were very different, but the transition seemed pretty seamless to me.
Okay. Okay.
Obviously, I was a manager, quote unquote, in TWA, who obviously trained to work, and so they knew they could throw me into six mans, and they could throw me into tag matches, and I could go in and bump for the baby faces as needed. So I did a lot of that, but I was primarily that's where the devious thing came from. I was primarily a
Okay.
manager. Um, when the when the TWA folded and Eastern Championship Wrestling started, um, there was not really a place for me. I did at first, there was, and I was still managing Hot Body and Larry Winters and doing some things like that. But as things started to snowball, there was less and less for me to do there, and I just said to Todd, I said, "Listen, I'll do whatever you want me to do, but I'd love to work. I don't care about having a spotlight as a manager. I've been training, and I feel like I'm I'm good at this. Not that I was a great worker, because I never was, but I'm good at selling. And I was a bit of a smaller guy, and we had some guys that weren't all that big, so I knew that I could help put them over, and make them look like monsters. So I just said, if you don't need me as a manager, just I'll do whatever you need me to do. So that was my transition out of the managing thing. Um, but it was just, I don't know, it was just what we were doing. I didn't really you perceive it as anything other than just finding another way to be involved. That's what it was for me.
Can I
Really
ask?
interesting. Yeah, go ahead, Brian.
I was going to say, what was your preference and all? Did you prefer to be a manager, or do you prefer being a wrestler?
I liked them both. I liked them both. I was a little more of a character, obviously, as a manager, and I was doing a hybrid of all the people I had seen growing up. I had a little bit of all of the old WWF guys that I grew up with, Lou Albano and people like that, with a little bit of just a little bit of my own thing thrown in. But I don't know. I actually really did get a lot of satisfaction out of just work, and even if it was just going out and getting an ass kicking for a couple of minutes, I felt a satisfaction in that was different for me, than the managing part. Even though the managing part was a little more, maybe, I don't know, glamorous is not a great word to use with,
No,
but
I know what you're talking about, because I
yeah,
get that. I
your
did
spotlight
I was a
maybe.
manager and all too, and also I get that aspect.
Yeah,
I know for me, I always thought that it was important to know how to be able to bump. So if you need to be in a match with to get with the baby face, get your ass whooped, then you could do that. So I get that completely.
yeah, absolutely. But all good. I mean, I would do whatever they asked, I would do it. I rarely said no. I can't remember really saying no to almost anything. The only thing that Eddie Gilbert asked me to do at one point was he wanted to do a hair versus hair thing, and asked me if I'd be willing to cut off my ponytail. And at the time, I mean, now I wouldn't be so precious about it, because I've had to do it a few times over the years for job interviews and stuff like that. But
Right.
at that time, I just, that was the one thing I didn't want to do. So I probably lost maybe an opportunity to grab a little spotlight. But I'm sure it wouldn't have been any ongoing thing. It probably would have just been for a one or two match angle, and that was it.
They
But
probably had
everything
a
else,
big giant, they probably had a big giant feud plan for you, multiple months,
I don't think so. I got to cut one promo one time, on ECW TV, and that was it. And I thought it went well, but there
I
were.
just saw it actually. It was on Peacock. I
Oh,
was
really?
watching all the ECW episodes, and it happened to come on.
With the Stan
So,
Hansen deal.
yeah.
Yeah. When we did our pilots, I did a few
Yeah.
things. I did some interviews and whatnot for the pilots that we recorded. But once the real syndicated show started, that was the only time. And Paulie just let us go. That was total improv. And I thought it went well, but that was the beginning and end of my promos in ECW. I got to do some on the indies in the 2000s.
Yeah.
I got to.
Okay.
And they're out there if you search hard enough for them.
I have to look around. Any kind of favorite memories from ECW? Anything worth mentioning from your couple of years there?
All of it. Well, I was there for the whole thing. I mean, just to be
Okay, I thought
clear.
you stopped in '96.
No. I was.
I
I wasn't.
apologize.
I wasn't used. You weren't seeing me.
Okay.
Although you would still see me in.
Kathy was seeing you. Yeah.
Kathy was seeing me.
Yeah.
It's good to
I
be
wasn't.
seen by Kathy. Yeah, it's.
I love Donnie.
I would still be used in like schmaz stuff. Go out and
Okay.
stooge people off, or if we're breaking up a fight or whatever, you can find those still. So I was on for just a few seconds at a time with those, but I stopped working TV matches. 96 probably was the last year I was on
Okay.
a good bit. 90, 93, 94, 95. all the time. Like, so
Yeah,
I was tired of seeing me. And I was hurting big time from that too. But I was there, and I would do whatever. I mean, I was at Paul's elbow during the first pay-per-view. You don't see me, and when in Wrestling with Shadows, when he's giving that speech to the locker room at that, I'm right there. I mean, I'm under him, but I'm not in the camera shot.
yeah.
Doesn't matter. I was there. I know I was there. Um,
It's
and I didn't travel. That was the other thing. I traveled because of my day job. Um,
okay.
I don't know if I'd say I was a weekend warrior, but I was not. I was not flying to shows because
Okay.
I had music gigs that were money, and the money was better than anything I was getting out of the wrestling, um, and because I was never really on the ECW stuff. I was rarely booked. I mean, I was somebody that was there, and they knew I was there, and if I was there, they would use me. But it wasn't like I got a phone call, "Hey, we need you for this match next weekend." That never happened. It was more like they knew I was going to be there, and so if they needed somebody to do whatever, I was there, and I had my gear, and when called upon, I will serve. So, and I worked a ton of matches that way, but I was never really booked per se. Even on I can't remember what it's called. I think was it Hardcore Homecoming in in
For the
'05?
reunion? Yeah,
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 Yep.
yeah. I
Hardcore
yeah.
Homecoming.
the show that
That
was the
was a
same
good show.
weekend
Yeah,
as the One Night Stand, right?
yeah, yeah.
I think it was the same weekend.
There were
Uh,
all these reunion shows that year.
yeah, yeah.
Francine had one too.
Hers was '97, I think. No, not
Okay,
'97.
okay,
'07, 2007.
okay, okay.
Sorry.
See, I'm getting old. I can't retain dates anymore.
Hers
My wife's a
and
history teacher. I have no idea.
yeah, and I showed up and she goes, "Oh, I would have booked you. I didn't know you were coming." You know, I show up if you need me.
Mhm.
But that '95, that '05 one, that reunion, I
Yeah.
wasn't booked on that show. And halfway through the night, um, I think Mikey Whitbrand came over to me and he goes, "You got gear? You have something you can put on?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "You're booked." So they were coming up with some kind of thing for Raven and Sandman, and um,
Okay.
I ended up making a brief appearance there. So,
Pretty
so that
cool.
was cool. But all of that stems back to being ready to go, to being prepared. And so, even though I wasn't traveling and doing all of those other shows, when the show was in Philly, Jersey, um, Delaware, we did some. If it was close enough by and I could get to it, I would be there, and I would get used a lot of the time. So,
Well, it's interesting to me, Donnie. You said that you were there for the duration of ECW.
oh
Obviously,
yeah.
a lot of changes
Hmm.
over that period of time. From your perspective, how much different was ECW by the time it closed its doors versus like the animal that it was when it kind of started after
The,
TWA?
the vibe was definitely different in the locker room. You
Yeah.
had a massive changeover of talent, right? And some of the guys that were working with us toward the end were guys that I had seen early on in my career, or had even a couple of them. I can't say I helped train them, but when they were just starting, I was on some indie shows with guys like Steve Carino and Joey Matthews and uh, Skull Von Cross. I was Cross Vito. Vito Lagrasso was on one of our earliest Bar Wars shows that we did for TWA, and then
Okay.
he ended up in ECW. So there were a lot of guys that I crossed paths with, who ended up playing a big role in that very latter half uh, of our run. But I didn't know anything about what was going on the business side of it. Um, I turned, and if I saw things, I just turned a blind eye because that wasn't why I was there. I wasn't there to party, and I wasn't on the road per se with everybody. So my whole thing was be there. If they need me to contribute, I'll contribute. If I have to go to Foreman Mills next door and buy something because somebody needs it, I mean, literally, I would do that. I thought of myself as a worker slash gopher. Gladly. It was not, here I've been on TV a bunch of times and worked all these shows, and then maybe one night all I have to do is make a run to the store and pick up some stuff for New Jack to hit people over the head with or whatever.
Right. Right.
All good. All good. I make no delineation, honest to God, with that stuff. It's if I'm contributing, I'm a happy guy. If I walk in the back and nobody says, "Why are you here?" You're supposed to be here. I'm a happy guy. So it was all good. But it was definitely less of a brotherhood kind of vibe as the time went on, and
Okay.
seemed a little bit more business like people were trying to get somewhere else to do something or get notoriety so that they could move on to something else. In the early days, it was more like we're all here because we're trying to make this the thing.
Okay.
And maybe it's because people saw more than I saw and saw writing on the wall, and we're thinking, okay, this may not be around much longer, so I better make a mark so that I can go somewhere else with this on my resume. That might have been it.
Was there ever a time when you kind of felt unsafe in ECW, whether other wrestlers or fans or anything like that?
I probably should have. I probably should
Okay.
have. And there was only one or two times when I felt somebody didn't really take care of me as well as they could or could have should have maybe.
Right.
But
Right.
for the most part, they would ask it. They would say, "Listen, this is what I have planned. Are you cool with
Okay.
this?" And I never said no. I mean, I just never said no. I mean, most of the guys that were there wouldn't say no to anything anyway, so it's not like that's a big deal. But um, go take a chair shot. Okay, need you to blade, which I only did a couple times, but memorable for me. Um, sure, you know, it's because it just felt like, yeah, that's just one of these are skills you need to have. You need to take a chair shot. You need to
Right.
you need to get power bombed off the top rope. You need to go through two tables. I was the first one. I was Public Enemy put me through two tables. They had not done that to anybody until they did it to me. I was the first. That's claim. It's my claim to fame.
Sounds delightful. No, that's really cool though.
Yeah, I mean Teddy. I trusted
Yeah.
Teddy, and Teddy said, "Listen," he said, "it's probably." He did say probably. He said, "It's probably going to hurt me more than it's going to hurt you." I said, "Whatever. If you want
Right.
to do it,
Right.
let's do it." So, and that was with that was a tag match, Public Enemy against myself and Canyon, Chris Canyon. So
Wow. Okay.
yeah.
Cool. Cool. So this listener wants to know your favorite opponent between the TWA and ECW.
Mm. Um, that's tough. Um,
They love to stump people.
yeah. I I mean this answer could change tomorrow, maybe, but
Okay.
I liked working with the Pit Bulls
Okay.
because they weren't much taller than me, although they were much wider and you know uh,
Yeah. Very thick.
but they were much more everything. But I
Okay.
knew those guys. The very first show that I ever did any kind of spot on, and it was when I just dipped my toe into training. Was a one of Larry Sharp's shows, and worked with those guys. That's the first time I
Yeah.
met Popeye too. Popeye was leading the Pitbulls to the ring. That was his gig. He wasn't even wrestling with them. He was in gear, but he didn't wrestle. He just led them to the ring. And so I had a fondness for those guys, and they took care of me. I mean, I got beat up, but it was that was to be expected. But they took care of me, and they were just they were good guys. I did take take Anthony to the hospital a couple of times after shows for injuries, and got to hang out with them in those kind of situations. So we were I mean, I won't say we were close, but it was as coworkers, we got along really well. But I like pretty much working with everybody, even the guys that nailed me. I worked with Axel and Ian Rotten, and those were
Okay.
tough. Those were tough nights at the office. And
I I remember Axel and Ian scaring the crap out of me as a fan because I was booing them. And they didn't like that very much. That was yeah. I was probably about 16, 17.
Yeah. Yeah, they were scared of me too. But again, it was I remember Axel coming up to me one day. He goes, "Listen, I like to get you in the corner." He goes, "Would this be okay?" And we're in the locker room. He goes, and he just starts punching me in the head, and I'm like, "Yeah, okay, go for it." I guess he just wanted to make sure I wasn't going to bail, in the match.
Right.
And I'm like, no, I get it. You gotta lay it in for that crowd. It made perfect sense. He did power bomb me once it was, my neck was hurt for a good couple months afterwards, but stuff happens, no biggie. But yeah, I'd say probably right now I'm going to say pit bulls, and check with me tomorrow. Could be somebody else.
Gotcha. Ryan, I know you had a
Sal
question.
Bellomo. I'm going to say Sal Bellomo.
He was fun. He was fun.
I worked him 3 or 4 different occasions, and he was cool.
I liked on those early ECW TV episodes where like he came in as like this raging maniac and he ended up being one of the more popular guys on the show.
Yeah, well, he was
great.
He was throwing toys out to the crowd. He was doing all sorts of stuff. He was an interesting guy in real life. Yeah, and again, the guy I watched on WWF TV looked totally different. And when I met him, I'm like, really? That's I kind of had to push his hair out of the way and look at him. Oh yeah. One time I'm working him one time, and I'm throwing forearms, and my hand got caught in his beard and his hair because he had. Boy. Yeah, and I went to pull away, and I was stuck in it, and I heard him go, "Ooh!" Like, yeah, it was. I don't know. That was a difficult one. He ended up giving me a mule kick that was pretty solid in that one, but I deserved it.
Cool. Ryan, I know you had a question or two.
Yeah, absolutely.
Don E.
So my question is a little bit of a two-parter, I guess. So we talked ECW and TWA, but what about a non-ECW/TWA promotion you worked in? Did you have a favorite one, and then also a favorite non-ECW TWA match that you want to talk about?
Yeah, well, so the cool thing with that deal is that even though my ECW career in ring was one of just doing jobs and getting beat up, that once the 2000s came and I got a chance to work on some indies, there were people that they actually were showing me respect. It was like, oh, really? And they go, yeah, you were this. I mean, they had seen the stuff. A lot of them went to those shows and they saw it on TV. So, unbeknownst to me, I actually gained a little respect from the people, and that was very cool. It was really, I didn't get to call matches, with rare exceptions, until the 2000s, and again, I was already beat up and older to be in the ring. I was working with guys who were 18 and 20, and I was twice their age, or more at that as the 2000s went on. And that was cool. And I managed to stay in shape enough and get my cardio up enough that I could go in and do 8-minute matches, 10-minute matches, 15 minutes with these kids. A lot of whom, again, went on to have some success, early matches with guys like the Backseat Boys, Trenton, and guys like that. trying to think of some other names. So I worked for Bay Ragnes, promotion, Liberty All Star Wrestling. Got to work
Okay.
lots of shows for him. And there was a group called ACPW, American Championship Pro Wrestling, out of my home area, Delaware County, the PA, that ran consistently from 2005 up through 08, 09, and hit or miss since then. But they're still around on occasion. There was the same guy running it, and he rented rings out. Also, he had a couple of rings that he would rent to different promotions. This guy, Chris Sutton, but those guys were great to me. They were just they let me do stuff, and it was stuff I didn't get to do for the first 10 years of my career, and so that was good. I worked programs with, and these are not household names. If you're from the Philly area, you would know these people more so.
Yeah. Yeah.
A guy named Niles Young, who was a CZW guy, and I
So
worked.
yeah. Yep.
Yeah, we worked with him.
Yeah.
Worked with him a bunch, and he was great to work with. A guy was known as Mark Smart, who worked ECWA. He was part of the Chick Magnets, I think, was their team in ECWA. But I
Okay.
worked him a
Brian
ton.
Socha.
Brian Socha, right? Who now is the one of the voices of the bare knuckle fighting group that's all over the place. I worked a lot for Damon Feldman, the celebrity boxing dude. He
Oh, I
ran.
did some stuff with him.
Yeah, he ran a wrestling promotion for a while that I
Okay.
worked for.
I did his pillow fighting.
Yeah,
I was the voice of pillow fighting for a few shows.
yeah. There you go. Oh,
Just
Oh,
when
I
you want to
bet
wake up
you
as you
were,
go to
Brady.
bed.
I bet you were.
Oh, I was.
Brady found the best job of his life right there, probably.
They had me in a bed with ropes in between Tia Tequila and Octomom, and it was amazing.
The
I wouldn't change a
Octomom.
thing.
Right, Octomom worked for
Good old Damon. I used to love
man.
Damon. He would always come on our VOC started out in terrestrial radio on WNJC, and Damon was like a regular guest on that show.
Yeah. But
Guy.
when I was a little kid, we're from the same area, he and I. And when I was a little kid, I knew his dad was a famous boxing trainer. His dad was like a very sort of famous local celebrity in our area. So I met him several times. But I left out Blue Meanie's promotion, worked for 3PW. And they were very good to me. And it was a combo of things. They actually brought me in to help in the locker room because Todd was involved. Todd was involved in that too. And there were a lot of young guys, and they were bringing in some great talent from out of town, but they just needed somebody to help run the locker room because Mimi had his hands full with his co-promoter.
Yeah. I understand.
You're right.
Say no more.
Yeah. So that was cool. So for 2 or 3 shows, I was there just working in the back and helping put promos together with AJ Styles and with Chris Daniels and Low Key and Joey Matthews because they were all regulars at those shows.
Yeah.
And then they started booking me to wrestle. So I worked a bunch of times with them and wrestled. I worked Battle Royals. I did tags against Jack Victory and Rebel. Did I think I worked with CJ O'Doyle, who was one of their guys. I worked a bunch with him in ACPW too. He was a good Philly area talent. He's down in Florida now, and he still works. Trying to think who all else. Oh, did an angle with Bill Apter and Todd and you remember April Hunter?
Yeah. I remember April.
The big redhead, and Jamie, Velvet Sky, who was Talia, right? So
they were TNA at the time, right? They were the tag team, weren't they?
But not yet. Not yet.
Okay. Before that,
maybe she was not Velvet Sky yet. She was still Talia for another.
Yeah. Well, that's what it was like, Talia and April, I thought, but like that could have been after that. Again, my timeline runs together.
Right, and she ended up working with
Yeah.
Angelina Love, I think, or would,
Yes,
if I had that
beautiful
name
people.
right. Yeah,
Yeah.
but she
Yeah.
and April were on the road quite a bit. They did Mexico and they did a lot of stuff, and they both came
Yeah.
out of New England. I think they may have trained at Kowalski's school, and also I think with Jason Knight, uh, perhaps up there. Um, so worked with them and did an angle where I wrestled against April. Amazing, we got my ass kicked, just like you'd imagine. So
Yeah.
that was a lot of fun. And
No,
then
that's really cool. Yeah.
she choked Bill Apter out, which was and I think he legit started choking because it was a little more than he was ready for. I think.
I'm
Um,
sure.
Can I
I'm
just say
sure.
that, as we all probably do, that I love Bill Apter, and he, I was responsible for a lot of things that I got to do. I mean, I got to be in magazines. Why? I don't know. I think he took a liking to me, and a couple of their photographers liked me, and I ended up with pictures in those magazines. And I'm thinking, why am I in these magazines
Yeah.
with these stars? I mean, it just didn't make sense to me.
No,
Uh,
it's really cool.
they gave me
I
the
yeah. Go ahead.
PWI 500 thing. I mean, that
Yeah.
was crazy. So thank you and
I
all of
always
your
wanted to
brethren.
be I always wanted to be Bill Apter growing up. I did. I didn't know that this would be the end result,
Right,
wanting
right,
to be
right.
Bill Apter, but here I am. So
Yeah.
um
And and
amazing guy. Yeah.
he really, what a
And a Hall of Famer now, by the way. I didn't
yes.
even congratulate him. Yeah.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah,
That was cool.
he and Kurt Angle going to the Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame.
That's
Well
right.
deserved. Well
That's right.
deserved.
Well, look what
Yeah.
I mean, love those magazines or hate them. That was all we had, right? I mean,
Hmm.
other than watching TV, those magazines were our lifeline and our connection to the business, to the sport. And, doesn't get any bigger than that.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. Obviously, the magazines played a huge deal in in the way that a lot of local wrestlers were able to make a name for themselves in the area. Being
Hmm.
a Philadelphia-based magazine at that point and having Bill Apter or whoever at the shows,
Yep.
Brandy later on, Dan Murphy.
Yeah.
But just having that kind of a presence, the magazines it put TWA on the same level, I thought at least, or ECWA on the same level as WWE to a certain extent, or WCW.
Yeah.
It put ECW on the map, that's for sure.
It's akin to, again, when I was a kid reading about the AWA and trying to figure out how Vern Gagne's name is pronounced, for instance. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't see AWA. I had no access to that TV, but I felt like I knew them, and that I felt like I knew who Billy Robinson was, and I knew who Gagne was, and Ray Stevens and Nick Bockwinkel. Now, later, when I finally got to see them work, even though it was late in the game, you're like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, now I understand. These guys are some of the best workers there ever were, and in any era, those guys are going to be amazing. Um, Ch- uh, Championship Wrestling from Florida. Holy shit! That was the wake up call for me as a young guy, um, because we were getting those shows on UHF TV at like midnight, um, and I would sneak down from my bedroom to watch those shows in the basement, at midnight as a young guy, and it freaked me out because I loved pro wrestling so much, and I caught a lot of crap for it from my friends and my family, um, and all we had access to in the Northeast was WWF,
Yeah.
and sure, some of the greatest guys ever were there, but it was a different brand of wrestling. And, you know, look, I respect any worker that gets in the ring and works, but there's a huge difference between your your enhancement guys who worked in the South, who all look like they could really work, and guys up here who look like they just grabbed them out of a bar, and not a tough bar necessarily, and threw them in the ring. Guys that couldn't bump and couldn't sell, and I would watch it and just searching for like something a little more, with a little more gravitas. Even as a
Yeah.
kid, even as an 8-year-old or a 10-year-old, I longed for that because I loved it so much. I wanted to be able to show people and go, look at this. This is just like football, it's just like baseball. It deserves your respect. Like that's what I was thinking. And when I saw Florida and Georgia championship wrestling, and it looked like an athletic competition, and I was just blown away by it. And that was, so all of a sudden people say, "Who's your favorite wrestler?" I go, "Jack Briscoe." "Who's your favorite wrestler?" "Terry Funk." People didn't know these guys up here,
Yeah.
except with rare exceptions. So anyway, that's going off topic a little bit, but that rocked my world. And to this day, my preference in wrestling is still that kind of wrestling. 70s Southern wrestling. Take away some of the crazy Memphis gimmicks or whatever, but
Right.
just where it looks like two men having a fight, you know, with
Yeah.
with with enough skill that you could be sitting ringside and going, "Wow, okay, yeah,
Yeah.
that looked real."
Well,
Loved it.
that's cool. That's cool. Now that does serve as a perfect segue for a question that I know that Howard had. Go ahead, Howard.
Donnie, I ask all of the wrestlers that join not this podcast alone, but the one I do on Thursday nights. Um,
Okay.
and I believe the best, at least for me, I started watching wrestling in the very late 79, 80-ish, and on. And I believe that the best year of pro wrestling was probably late 85 through 86,
Mm,
especially Jim Crockett Promotions and
mm.
everything that was going on down there. So my question, as Ryan's was, is a two-part question. If you could pick any wrestler, any era, Attitude Era, all the way back to the 70s when you started watching it, who would you want to wrestle, and why is it Bobby Eaton?
Well, first of all, we all, I think, bow to Bobby, and what a sweetheart. I got to meet him a few times, and yeah, so I mean, what can you say about that guy? Um, and Condrey was great, and Ricky Robert were great. It's just there's so much to learn from watching those guys. Even now, that's just, I mean, it's an encyclopedia of how it's supposed to work, how you're supposed to work, how you're supposed to work with the crowd and your opponent and the whole deal. It's perfect stuff. Um, Although if I had to pick one, that's hard, man. That is real difficult. But we're
It
going with
stumps a lot of people. He tends to stump a lot of people with that question. So don't,
You know, what? Give me your top three. I'll limit to your top. Give me your top three.
I'm gonna say Jack Briscoe. I'm gonna say well, I didn't work a match against Terry Funk, but I certainly got beat up by him a few times. One of my, I don't know if I've ever told this story or not. We're doing an ECW show at a place called the Valley Forge Music Fair. Kathy,
Mhm.
Okay.
you remember that, right? And
Oh yeah.
that place was in the round. When there was a band or whatever, you were in the middle, and the stage slowly turned, and then the crowd starts at ring level and goes up on all sides. It's like, whoa, like that. So there was like an 8-man tag, and Terry Funk and Road Warrior Hawk, and that was a dream come true too. Getting to work with Hawk, that was very cool.
I'm sure.
And he was so cool. Anyway, so they send us all down at the end of this thing, and we're pairing off with guys, and we're trying to stop the brawling. I think Mr. Hughes was there, Curtis was there, and Shane Douglas, and I forget who all else was in it. Maybe Public Enemy was part of that. And everybody's brawling up the aisles to get out of the place. That's how you got out. Or there was 2 downward things to get to the locker room, but everybody was going up the aisles. And Kevin Sullivan had done something to me, and I'm laying in these narrow aisles, and coming up from behind me is Terry Funk. Now, I was just something in his way, he wasn't looking for me. But he picked me up from behind, and he goes, "Spread your legs." I'm like, okay, I like the sound of this, but I'm in no position to argue. And he kicked me, gave me a shot into the nuts. Relatively heavy, but that was just hearing his voice say that to me, it was an honor.
That's
I'll
awesome.
never forget. Spread your legs. So maybe we'll throw Terry in there. The guys I love Billy Robinson. I just love to watch him work. I love guys that work like that. Guys like today, like Claudio. Just guys who look believably like they know what they're doing and can do it at a high level, and just don't appear to be cartoons. They appear to be guys who can fight and wrestle, and I love that stuff. So, did I say Wahoo McDaniel? That would have been a dream, and I was on shows with him, but never worked against him.
Okay.
But yeah, just to be in there with somebody that that deliberately straight ahead, believable, yeah. So I love guys like that.
Very cool. Very cool. Now, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about working for Joel Goodhart. Obviously, a huge visionary in wrestling. Between the show, the radio program that he had, and TWA, and it just seemed like he was all over everything. Like his fingerprints were all over so much of the wrestling scene in Philadelphia back then. What was it like to be part of Joel Goodhart's promotions?
I heard him on the radio, like most of the rest of us before we met him.
Sure.
I didn't go on
he
any.
He taught me kayfabe, ironically.
Yeah, right.
He did. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I first met him. This is some of the weird circumstances that led me also to being able to get into the business after wanting to do so since I was a kid, but not having any clear path to do it. I went to the gym with a guy who was a audiovisual guy, and somehow he had hooked up with DC Drake, who I'd never heard of, because at the time the indies weren't a thing, right? And even though I was a huge wrestling fan, I didn't know about the indies. I just didn't. So he tells me, yeah, I work with this wrestler, and he's having me produce TV shows for him. I'm like, oh, who is it? And he tells me, and I'm like, well, I never heard of this guy. So, what is this, some kind of fly-by-night thing? But it was, I think, the NWF, which was a promotion that Don had going, and they did TV tapings up in, I think, Allentown. I don't know if they did it at the Ag Hall or not, but up there. And then, anyway, so this guy, Skip, was going to produce a TV taping for DC Drake at the old Latin Casino, which was an old nightclub in Camden, New Jersey. That was
I've heard of that.
About to be torn down. This is
Cherry Hill,
right? Well,
yeah, Cherry Hill. Yep.
Really, though, kind of Camden. No, Kath, wasn't it sort of?
Nope, Cherry Hill.
No, it was Cherry Hill.
Well, it was Camden in my mind. There's an album title for you, Camden in my mind. So I asked Skip if I could tag along and help, maybe carry a camera, help him, whatever, because I just thought it would be cool to be involved at a wrestling show, or at least to get in, So that's what I did. And I spent the whole night on my knees, killing myself as what they call the cable guy, because the cameraman had
Oh
like a
God.
giant heavy metal camera on his thing here, and he had all of this heavy cable, and he was going all around the ring. So I was the guy that had to follow him, keep the cable from getting tangled up and all that stuff. And Joel was at that show, and so I introduced myself and I said, "Hey, I've listened to your show, and this and that." And I tell Drake this story all the time. Absolutely true. After it's all over and we're just relaxing and chatting after they're breaking the ring down and stuff, and I said, hey, I've been trying to find a way to get in the business, for years. And Don turned to me and he says, I've been trying a way to get out of it for years. He said, which is his sense of humor, But
Right.
having just finished a couple nights of TV tapings, he was exhausted, and I'm sure that's how he felt at that moment. But anyway, so that was the first time I met Drake, and Joel was at that show, and then it was a year later that I met Rockin' Rebel, who was also local to me out where I lived. He was from the same general area, as was Sandman, another local guy, whose his late older brother was somebody I knew from high school. So there's a little connection there, but I didn't know Hack until we started wrestling. But I first trained. I was going to go to the Monster Factory to try to be a ref or a manager, something like that, and met with Larry. And then Rebel and Larry had some kind of falling out. No surprise there. And so Rebel said, "Oh, I know another place where there's a ring." We went down to North Wildwood, and Joey Maggs, for some reason,
Wow.
was
Okay.
running a school
That's right.
in the
Joey was
back
down there
of
with
Attila's
his
gym.
yep.
So that's where
Yep.
I began training. I trained with Joey and whatever guys were passing through that summer and then into the winter. And I was, from where I lived, it was a 2-hour drive to get to North Wildwood. I would work my day job and then drive down to North Wildwood. They had no heat in the winter in this place, but the ring was up, so we'll go in and wrestle in the freezing cold for an hour and get my ass kicked, and then drive 2 hours back home, and did that a few nights a week for a few months, and then Joey disappeared on us, and that was right when Joel was starting Ringmasters, his school. So I glommed onto that, and the rest is something. Yeah. So, and then at Joel's school, I trained with Larry Winters, with Ron Shaw, who some might remember. He was an enhancement guy for McMahon.
Okay.
I don't know when he started, but we used to see him on TV doing jobs. He was a big dude. He was like 6'6", 6'7". So they would use him, and he would get some stuff in on some talent. And I think his big claim to fame was he went over on David Sammartino at the Spectrum in some sort of controversial fashion. But anyway, so those two guys, and then all the local guys were coming through. So that's Hot Body and Tony Stetson and Anthony and Gary, the Pitbulls, and what the heck? Who's that big guy? I think he was called Man Mountain Moore, who ended up being on WCW TV. I think Stroh
Yep.
might
Mike
know.
Moore.
Mike Moore, right?
Michael. Yeah.
I forget what his gimmick was in WCW, but he was there for a cup of coffee.
Max Payne.
No.
Oh, was that Max Payne? No.
No. It wasn't Max Payne.
Jesus.
Mike's first promo was he was in a bar, and Paul was with him. Paul Lee.
Right. Okay.
And then, like you said, he was a quick cup of coffee.
Right.
Is this the Motor City?
Okay. I know you're talking about now.
Right.
Okay.
Was he
Is
the
the
Motor
Motor
City
City
Madman?
guy? Madman.
Yes.
Yes.
That was him, right?
Okay.
So he
I
was a
had to
guy.
put it together. Yeah.
All these guys passed through because it was a ring in Northeast Philly, and it was easy to get to off of the boulevard and off of 95. Here's another childhood crazy it was not a dream come true, but kind of, sort of. When I was a little kid, Dick the Bulldog Brower was a challenger to San Martino and was on WWF TV all the time. And he had retired long since, but he lived in Delaware somewhere. And his son, Rich, wanted to get in the business just a little. I think Dad was pushing him because he never seemed like he really wanted to be there too much. But anyway, so Brower got in touch with Joel, and he would bring his son up. They would drive up to Ringmasters, and once in a blue moon, Brower would get in the ring and, show us like how help us with our punches and stuff like that. And it was just another one of those moments where I'm like, my brothers and I watched this guy, and he scared the crap out of us, watching him on TV. And here I am, I'm like work with him. I remember saying, "Don't flinch or I'll kill you." I remember saying that. His son was an athlete, but didn't really seem to have any interest in wanting to wrestle. But he was with us, and he worked a couple shows with us before he kind of disappeared as well. But that was a cool story. I got to work with Brower. He was on one of our shows at the Civic Center that we did.
Okay.
Working with Funk and the Sheik or something. He was involved in it, just at ringside.
Well, you definitely lived the wrestling life for sure. Any regrets? Anything you would have done differently?
No, I'm just amazed that I did it at all. I mean, look, I was not a great athlete. I wrestled in school, wasn't great. I was, and try to still be, though I can't move much anymore. But, in my music career, I was always somebody that jumped around on stages and, hopped up on risers and did all that stuff. And I had an aptitude for wrestling because I was so wrapped up in it for so many years that,
Yeah.
I remember Joey Maggs looking at a couple of things with me and going, things I was selling. And he goes, "Wow, where'd you get that from?" I said, "I don't know. It's just instinct. Like, I know that's what I'm supposed to do because I've just absorbed it to that degree over the years." And so I just took an instant, it just seemed like it was where I was supposed to be. I loved, again, you look back at it now, you go, "Well, maybe I shouldn't have loved it so much," but I love the bumps. I love the bruises. I love just the whole feel of it. Even when I was getting hurt, it just felt like home. And the business side of it, which I didn't love so much, but that felt a lot like the music business, dealing with club owners and managers and shady folks. It seemed like they were always lurking in the locker rooms and places like that, which was, again, why a guy like Goodhart stands out. Um, just I mean, he's a guy that allowed me to live my dream. Todd Gordon, people will say what they want to say about him, and all I can say is he was good to me, and he gave me a chance to live my dream as well. And even Paulie, to that extent. And then the guys I worked with in the 2000s, whether it was Mimi or Chris from ACPW, got a chance to extend. I worked until I think 2012 was my last match, and I couldn't keep going at that point because I just wasn't safe for myself or anybody else. But so I did it for 23 years, and I had to be in the gym 5-6 days a week, keep my cardio up, and I foregoed. What's the appropriate word there, Brady?
For when? No,
I
for
for I skipped.
I have foregone it.
Forebode? Would it be forebode?
I let a lot of things pass by, in my life because of that dedication. Because I thought I have to do this. I can't go out. I'm not going out. I'm not watching TV. I mean, I never saw a single Seinfeld episode. People go, "You never?" I never did because I couldn't watch TV all through the 90s because every night I was in the gym. I was not watching TV. I was not videotaping it to watch later. So, that's a sacrifice, and I sacrificed relationships and this and that. No, and I have absolutely no regrets. I wish my knees worked, and I wish my fingers didn't go numb in the middle of playing guitar, but you know, people have it. Some people have it worse than me. A lot of people do, and to me, it was all worth it because I got to do something that I loved more than anything. So all good.
Now you get to enjoy music, which is a lot easier on your body.
Yeah, well, I did it all the way
So that's
through.
good.
Did it all the
Yeah.
way through.
Okay.
I got lost going to gigs a couple of times because I took choke slams and got my bell rung and
I shouldn't
couldn't
laugh at
remember how
that.
to
Yeah.
couldn't remember how to get somewhere that I knew how to get to, and this was way
Yeah.
before GPS or any of that crap. So and you know it, you guys who had head injuries, you know what it's like. You'll be thinking to yourself, I know this is not right. I know how to get here, but I just can't. I can't quite grasp it. I can't quite focus. It's that weird thing, and that's again, it's. I'm not happy that happened, but I understand why it happened because it's part of what you have to deal with. Football players and everything else. It's you take a certain risk if you're doing something physical like that, and I don't blame anybody. It's just part of what you have to go through. So.
Sure, absolutely. So TWA One and Done is May 3rd at the 2300 Arena in Philly.
Awesome.
Coming up real quickly. Tickets and information 2300arena.com. Excuse me. John, what can we expect from the show?
Well, as many of us that were in the TWA that are around and ambulatory, we're going to be there doing various things. A couple of guys are actually going to be in the ring. A lot of us are going to be lumberjacks for the Tony Stetson, Michael Bruno blow off match for the rest of time. So looking forward to that. There's going to be some great young talent there. Tessa Blanchard is working, and I know she's controversial in some quarters, but as a worker and as somebody that you want to see perform in the ring, holy crap, what a talent! And she's working with Terry Gordy's daughter, I think, Miranda Gordy.
Yeah, Miranda. Yeah.
There's a guy. Amazing. Yeah, and I was on shows with Terry, both for TWA and for ECW. So that's a cool thing. Medusa's going to be there. I got to work with her. She wrestled Luna Vachon at one of the TWA shows, and Woman and I came out and interfered in that match. And there's video of that. That's a very cool memory. A shout out to Nancy, who was so nice to me and had really no reason to be, and was just amazing. And I got to work with her again. How does that happen to me? How did I get in that spot and be trusted to do that? I have no idea, but Jesus. Anyway, so yeah, and Medusa and Luna for that matter. She beat the crap out of me. That's a story. Maybe that's a story for another.
Yeah.
But
yeah, we'll have to jump on that.
She clocked me one time and popped my eardrum and knocked my jaw out of socket. And
Kathy did that to me once.
Yeah, but you have to understand, to Luna, that was a love tap.
Right, I get it.
Yeah.
Oh, she said afterwards to me, she goes, did I hurt you? And I said, nah, it's cool. As the air is like blowing out of the perforation in my eardrum. But again, and that was early, right? That was like within my first year and a half in the business. So I'm learning lessons, right? And I'm watching the veterans around me, and I'm learning how to comport myself, and I hope that I helped young guys, like in the 2000s when I was in all those locker rooms, learn a similar lesson that, professionalism, you leave the hype at the locker room door, and in locker room, you're professional, and you treat people nicely, and you lend people a hand if they need it. And for the most part, that's the way everybody was along the way with me. And learned a lot of lessons. Worked with Gangrel, right? Because he was with Luna and the Blackhearts, so that was very cool. Worked with him before his career blew up. Just another example. Yeah. Anyway, there's a million stories.
Now, listen, this has been amazing. I'm sure we took up way more time than you anticipated.
Oh, I'm
I really enjoyed it. I loved it. I
happy.
did.
Glad
Don,
to reconnect with you, first of all.
you too, brother. You too.
Yeah.
You too. Quick favor before we let you go, if it's
Sure.
okay. Could we get you to record a bumper to play on the beginning of the show? Just kind
Absolutely.
of tell people who you are and remind them that they're listening to In the Room, and we'll have you on your way.
Cool.
Okay.
You want to do that right now?
Yeah, ready?
Yep.
3. I'll put you on the spot. 3, 2. I did it wrong. 3, 2, 1.
Devious Don E. Allen here in the room with Brady Hicks. ECW original, TWA original. Don't forget, May 3rd, TWA One and Done at the 2300 Arena. You got to be there. We're all going to be there, so you have to be there. Professional wrestling is a religion. It's a way of life for all of us. Hang in there. The world's going to get better. Wrestling's going to keep getting better. Be there with us. We're going to be there with you. Thanks for being here in the room. Thank you, Brady Hicks.
Thank you so much. Don E. Allen, everybody. What a great time.
Yeah, man.
It was
Stro,
a
respect,
pleasure.
sir. We didn't get to
thank
really,
you, brother.
Yeah, we didn't really get to talk, but much respect.
Oh, absolutely. Same here, bro.
Mm-hmm.
We're trying. Can I mention it, Stro, or should I hold off?
Yeah, go ahead.
Nothing's firmed up. We're trying our hardest to get Maestro to come out for May 3rd for
Oh, cool.
the show and the convention. So
Awesome.
we're hoping it's going to work out. I haven't even told anybody that yet, other than Maestro and I are in our discussions. But
Okay.
we're
Well,
hoping he's going to be here with us.
what gets talked about in the room stays in the room.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. That's
And by
right.
the way, if we meet, I'm much shorter in person. I'll just say that. So that was a rib, though. Oh well, we'll talk about that some other time. They put in PWI that I was 5'10", and so you see
Yeah.
everywhere online. Wikipedia says I'm 5'10", and then people meet me, they're like, "What the hell happened?" So
They cut off half the foot, you know. Yeah. No, it was great to catch up with you, Don. We'll definitely talk soon.
awesome. Thank you, guys.
All right.
Kathy,
Take
love
care,
you.
brother.
Love you too,
Okay.
Donnie.
Bye.
See you, man. There you have it. ECW. I guess he's a legend. We can call him a legend. Certainly an ECW original. Don E. Allen, as he laughed. It was great to connect with him.